This is going to be an eye-opener, and I'm gonna get a lot of comments for this video. Zeolites have been really misunderstood. So they're literally in their way through it.
You're joking.
No, I'm being deadly serious.
That's terrifying.
Our liver and kidneys and body can't process rock, correct?
Not meant to, yeah.
It's not meant to, right?
Yeah.
So at any given point, this rock, well, what it essentially is, should never enter the liver or kidneys to be processed. It should never enter the muscles or the tissues of the cells, because there is no evidence or proof that once it does, it ever leaves, and if it doesn't accumulate and build up. This is why it's so important that it must have an entry and it must have an exit.
Function.
There
Yeah,
is the physical
yeah.
function. That's
Yeah,
what it is. You hit the
yeah,
nail on the head there, yeah.
yeah.
Tracy, you're just hitting the nail on the head today, man. You're hitting these really good nails on the head here, man. I'm liking this.
So, Dilly, what are we talking about today?
Tracy, we're going to broach the topic, zeolites. This is going to be an eye-opener, and I'm going to get a lot of comments for this video, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited because I think this is a lot of important information we're going to share today, and it's going to be so much fun because I think zeolites have been really misunderstood.
Well, I'm actually really excited about this video, kind of, because I don't think there's a lot of good information out there about zeolites and about their properties. Like, I know we're going to talk a little bit about, zeolite from the perspective of, Toxaprevent and, how to find a good zeolite and things like that. But also, I think I'm excited to shine a light on what zeolites are and how they can be utilized, because when it wasn't something that was spoken about when I did my training. And so it was something I came across like when I was deep into my clinical practice out of necessity. And actually I don't want to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Go on.
Zeolites are a little bit of a magic bullet. Like, they are a little bit of a magic bullet when it comes to, I know I'm going to sound like I'm contradicting myself, because you should never say there's a magic bullet. Obviously, there's a lot that goes around that.
Yeah.
But when you're feeling like absolute poop.
Pants. Poo pants. Okay. Go.
When you're feeling like absolute poo pants, I think zeolite can do a lot in one supplement. And it can also highlight kind of the root of issues by clearing up, all the congestion, if that makes sense. But anyway, let's get into it.
Yep.
Let's just dive right in. You're the zeolite expert here, so tell us, what is zeolite? Like, honestly, what the heck is zeolite?
So zeolites, first, I'm going to start with saying, is a family name. There's no such thing as the word zeolite. They all have different versions of it, and there's over 170 different types of zeolite. And there's different ones they're man-made ones, so synthetic zeolites, and there's also natural zeolites, so things like clinoptilolite, for example, or naturalite. So zeolites are actually porous minerals, and what that means is they've got like a sieve-like structure. So if you look at the structures, they're very different, and they're like what I look like cubes in some cases, or they can be really flat spaces, like flat structures like this. And what they're known as is something called molecular sieves. Meaning they can go through water, they can go through the air, and they can push the air through, but it can attach to things. And that's why they've been like renowned as molecular sieves, because they're able to capture things, but they're also able to let things pass through. And that's really, really important. It doesn't just absorb to everything. And that's what kind of gave zeolites its kind of name. That's what made it so important.
But where do zeolites actually come from? So, I'm thinking an apple is a fruit. Like, what is a zeolite?
So it comes from the natural form, comes from our natural air. It's basically a chemical process. When things like volcanic ash is erupted, it mixes with water, it creates that mineral structure. So it's two ions meeting and creating a structure. But then we've also been able to create this in labs in synthetic forms, and those synthetic forms are really, really important because they're actually used not only part of manufacturing but also part of agriculture. What makes zeolites of any signs so unique is they have two abilities. One is adsorbing and one is absorbing. And what I mean by absorbing, if it's got a structure like a K-type structure, it can absorb the toxin into it, or mineral, by the way, not just toxins, it can absorb the mineral as well. And adsorbing means it attaches to the outside of the structure. And that's actually what makes it so unique. What's fascinating about zeolites is it's been used, if you look at the history, it's been used for millions of years. And every company that quotes about zeolites will say it's been around since like Egyptian times and Greek times, because they talk about clay, because that's what it's known as is clay. But in current state now, it's used in a lot of manufacturing processes. We actually use a form of zeolite in the manufacturing of cheese because it keeps molds and bacteria at bay, which is incredible, right? But then one of the most primary uses of zeolite is actually agriculture. It is in more than you realize. We actually give it to cows, to chickens, to pigs, because it reduces the mycotoxin levels. We spray it into the ground to increase the mineral content and to bind the toxins. And just thinking about that shows you how powerful it is. And one of the most funniest things, and one product for anyone that owns cats, you know, cat sand. so cat products, the actual rock in there, that clay that they use, is a form of zeolite, because zeolite binds to ammonia. So that's what gets rid of the cat pee smell. So, and that shows you, like, even in laundry detergent, we add it because it softens the water. So,
and for anyone that has cats, you know that you need to get that good cat liver.
You definitely do.
That can absorb the smell, because if you don't get that one,
yeah,
it ain't good.
100%. And yeah, you're completely on point there. And it's even used in cleaning products.
Yeah.
So we actually add it into sprays, like mold sprays and stuff, to get rid of like the mold and mycotoxins. So zeolite is naturally dry and it absorbs water. It actually holds onto water. And this is really important because things like mold, for example, because they thrive in damp environments, being able to dry that out
starves the mold.
And destroying it's really, really important. So yeah, that is what zeolites are.
So I think the idea of taking zeolite as a capsule internally can be a little bit confusing, because when we think about supplements, we're very used to taking supplements for a specific purpose. So maybe your doctor or nutritionist told you to take omega-3 for your heart health, or maybe you were told to take iron because you're low in iron. Whereas zeolites work on so many different things in the body that actually multiple people could be taking the same thing but for different reasons. So I think that's where it gets confusing.
Yeah.
But now that you explained what zeolites are, and the fact that actually they're used externally, they're used in agriculture, they're used in manufacturing, and they're used internally, it just goes to show that actually there's a multitude of purposes. So that makes a little bit more sense.
I mean, can I just add on to what you said there?
Yeah.
Just to add on to it, it's, as I said at the start, it's a molecular sieve. And what we have to understand is it's a binder.
Yeah.
It's a binder. And that term binder has been used. Actually, I'm going to say the word abused a bit, because people don't understand binders and what their mode of action actually is. But as you said with the supplements, a whole point of a supplement is to fix a nutritional deficiency.
Yeah.
It's to literally, if you've not got enough of a certain mineral or a vitamin or a bacteria, you need to supplement with it. But with binders, or should I correctly say zeolite, clenophthalolite, or Toxaprevent, the whole premise of it is to take out what the body doesn't need. And you have to remember, this is really important, because if your body is toxic and holds on to toxins, that will cause health diseases. That's why we have our liver and kidneys. Our body naturally filters out those toxins. And that's where you switch it and you go, oh, actually, I'm not supplementing this. It's not adding to my diet. It's taking out what the body doesn't need.
Yeah, zeolite doesn't have a nutritional function. Essentially, it's a physical function. It's like a cleanup function.
There is the physical function. That's what it is. You hit the nail on the head there, yeah. Terence, you're just hitting the nail on the head today, man. You're hitting these really good nails on the head here, man. I'm liking this.
It's the coffee I had before this, because I have not slept. You mentioned that there's loads of different forms of zeolite. Can you explain a little bit about, like, why are there so many different types of zeolite? And then, you know, if there's so many different types of zeolite, why does Toxaprevent use zeolite clenophthalolite? What's special about that?
So if you look at the agriculture process and manufacturing, it's that structure. that structure is what we need depending on what's used it for. So, for example, if you're mopping up oil, which is used in manufacturing, they need a specific structure that's much more larger and covers a lot more bases. They will create a synthetic zeolite for that.
So like a specific particle size and density and things like that, depending
Binding
on what the
capacity,
job at
ionic
hand is.
charge, because these zeolites have a negative charge. So they're binding to positively charged ions. So the negatives, like think of it as like a magnet. And I always liken it to like a garbage truck. That's what I normally liken it to. But it's also a structure. So you can build things off that zeolite. So you can also build things. So it's actually part of like manufacturing process to create polymers.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's so important. And that's why there's 170 different types and why it's been so readily available.
So the different types have different purposes.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
And so that's why there's 170 different types. But zeolite clinoptilolite is, from looking at the research, there's around about only 30 zeolites that are actually naturally made in the actual structure of the ground. And zeolite clinoptilolite derives from volcanic ash. It's one of the most readily available forms, but it's also because of how the particle size structure looks like.
So clinoptilolite is one of the few naturally derived zeolites, is what you're saying.
It comes from the ground.
Yeah.
What you're putting into your system is something that comes essentially from the ground, exactly like a supplement or vitamin that comes from food.
Yeah, and I'm guessing then, because you're going to talk a bit about particle size, it's one of the few that is appropriate for ingestion.
Correct,
Okay.
because it's naturally made. And, well, sorry, what you said there is correct, but it has to be added on. It has to be processed correctly to be ingested, because
So
you
it
can't
doesn't
ingest
just come. It doesn't just come as is and you ingest it. It has to be processed in a certain way.
It's really, really unsafe just to break it down. And by the way, I'm looking at a lot of companies out there who sell it very, very cheaply. That's all they're doing. They're literally just getting a rock of it, crushing it down and giving it to you. Because when it's in that environment, it's naturally absorbing and cleaning the toxins from the environment. It's naturally creating something to absorb and create that rock-like structure and formation of it. And that's what that process is. So it's got not only minerals in there, but it also contains toxins.
Okay. So it also, there's benefits and disadvantages. So let's talk a little bit about the disadvantages of zeolite, like why zeolites are bad, because what I'm hearing is there's tons of zeolites out there. Different ones are appropriate for different purposes, but even this natural form of zeolite clinoptilolite needs a certain amount of processing to make sure that it's safe for the body. So can you talk a little bit about what are the downsides of zeolite and why it requires processing to make it safe?
As I said moments ago, zeolite naturally binds to not only nutrients but also toxins in the environment. And so when you're actually getting that physical rock, because it's like a white rock, massive pieces, you get big pieces, small pieces, that is absorbed everything. But that particle size needs to be optimized for the digestive tract. So it needs to, if it goes in, it needs to leave, correct? And the problem is that they contain toxins. So when you're getting that manufactured rock, it's containing toxins. So it needs to be activated and all the toxins been removed. So that's stage one. Stage two is where it goes in the body. One of the biggest disadvantages of zeolite is the fact that it's rock. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. And just, you're a nutritionist. You've done the courses. You've got the degrees. You've got the backup behind it. Our liver and kidneys and body can't process rock, correct?
Not meant to, yeah.
It's not meant to, right?
Yeah.
So at any given point, this rock, of what it essentially is, should never enter the liver or kidneys to be processed. It should never enter the muscles or the tissues of the cells, because there is no evidence or proof that once it does, it ever leaves, and if it doesn't accumulate and build up. This is why it's so important that it must have an entry and it must have an exit. Because once it's absorbed the toxins, do you want it to sit in the body?
Hell no.
You want it to leave, right?
Yeah.
It's like you want it to exit the system. And this is where one of the other problems starts with. And then the structure. Now, the structure of actual physical zeolites, right, is aluminium and silica. Aluminium is one of the baselines of it. And so clinoptilolite naturally has a structure of 6 parts silica to 1 to 2 parts aluminium. Now, if I gave you some aluminium and said you to take this, would you take it?
Hell no.
Right.
In fact, I was going to say, when you say aluminium, that immediately sparks red flags.
Oh, yeah. And no one talks about the aluminium
Yeah.
part of it, right?
It's like, I'm out here trying to reduce my exposure to aluminium, so taking something that naturally contains aluminium is not what I'm about.
And so the important thing to note is that it's actually part of the structure. It doesn't break down, but it can break down. And the way it can be broken down is by the stomach acid. So stomach acid can destroy it. And so what you have to do is process it correctly to make sure that the way that the product's made up is that the stomach acid doesn't destroy it. And when you say that to people, it's controversial because people will just get that zeolite and be like, yeah, you know what? Don't worry. Put 3 scoops into water and just drink it.
Natural, just detoxifier. It's great.
Yeah. And that's where the controversy kind of kicks in about it. And so you've got these 3 really important things that are happening in the system, but the 4th one and the disadvantage of it is in the manufacturing processes. I can't begin to stress enough. I've just, and this is where I'm going to bring everyone listening and watching this, I'm going to bring you to this point. If it's naturally absorbed the toxins in the air, right? So let's say you put it through that process and it's been completely cleaned out. You then put it in a big bag, and you've seen how supplements are manufactured. I've seen how supplements manufactured. Go on YouTube and type in supplement manufacturers and I'll show you how they're manufactured. If you then just open that bag, stick it into a machine to put into capsules, the air around it isn't toxin free.
Yeah. What's the machine made of that it could be attaching to?
What are our hands? Any sorts of bacteria in our hands? And it's going to get absorbed in by that zeolite structure. So even how the zeolites are manufactured is so important.
But also, I mean, that's the manufacturing. But say you're purchasing this zeolite just as a powder in a tub. Like, what about every time you open that tub to take your supplement every day?
Girl, don't
it's
even get me
exposed to
started.
oxygen. It's exposed to whatever's in your environment. What if you live in a moldy, flat or home and you're opening that tub day in, day out? By some stage, you're very likely actually ingesting the absorbed molds, mycotoxins, things like that, rather than binding and removing them, which is what the purpose is.
Tracy, there's nothing I can add to what you just said there. That's completely correct. And this is the controversy that surrounds zeolites. And it's why zeolites have been given a bad name.
Yeah.
Because if you have a zeolite like that, and you classify it incorrectly as what I would say a food supplement, and you don't have the safety behind it, you can get away with it because you can't prove that it was from the product.
Well, as we said earlier, it's not a supplement. It's not like a nutritional supplement. It doesn't have a nutritional purpose, essentially. It's a device. It's a physical device.
It doesn't have a physiological or immunological function. It's simply going in, absorbing and then leaving. So you've got to understand it doesn't have a physiological or immunological function. It's not changing anything. It's just absorbing and leaving.
And if it's not doing that, then we have a problem.
Yeah.
So your zeolite should be just going in, absorbing and leaving. And if you can't prove that it's going in, absorbing and most importantly leaving, then we have a problem.
Yeah. I mean, and that's basics. That's really, really basics, because if you want to just list this out, so it has to be toxin free, it has to be packaged correctly and manufactured correctly, and it also has to be optimized to leave the body. That's 3 things that zeolites must all, as a foundation, must have.
I just want to, before we move on, I just want to circle back to your point about aluminium and zeolite, because I think a lot of people will be hearing that. And you mentioned that it can potentially break down in the stomach. So with Toxaprevent, what measures do they put in place to prevent that happening with their zeolite as opposed to other zeolites? How do we know that when taking Toxaprevent, you're not also taking aluminium in your system?
what we discovered was you have to reduce the stomach acid in order to stop the particle from breaking down. So, for example, with the Toxaprevent Medi Plus sachets, the purple box, that purple one is specially designed to go in through the mouth and into the stomach. So we added a blend of magnesium calcium carbonate, which reduces the stomach acid, and that prevents the actual acid from breaking down the actual MANC particle. And
you've proved that that's the case, so there's no aluminium released.
Oh, we not only proved it, we had to prove it before we got our medical device license. We had to show that safety data, and because it's not breaking down the particle, that's what makes it so interesting. But what I'm just going to bring everyone to, so you know Rennies.
Yeah.
Do you know what the baseline ingredient for Rennies is?
Yeah.
Magnesium and calcium carbonate. That's what they use to reduce stomach acid for people with acid reflux. Just going to throw that one in there because it shows you like how carbonate actually works. Because a lot of people are like, oh my God, you shouldn't take carbonate because it's not absorbed. It's not about absorption.
Yeah, magnesium, it's about neutralization.
Yeah, it's about neutralization of that stomach acid for other benefits.
Yeah. And then the red ones, obviously the purple ones are made to kind of act in the stomach, but for anyone wondering as well, the red ones, they're capsules, not sachets, and the reason being is that those capsules protect that from the stomach acid so they can move into the next stage of digestion. So that's why
Froxman are awesome. They actually did like delayed release studies, so they created that capsule because it's actually our own formulation, and what it does is it basically doesn't break down in the stomach acid, and it has a delayed release. So that enteric coating allows it to bypass the stomach where it enters the intestines and the colon. So what you're doing in combination is you're detoxing right from the top of the mouth all the way to the colon. And resisting acid.
Yeah. So
and not poisoning the body.
But because this acid resistance is so important, not just with zeolites, by the way, it's a big thing with several supplements, is like when you're looking at supplement creation and manufacturing, is how do we bypass the stomach acid to actually get whatever nutrient you're trying to get to where it needs to go. But what's the mechanism of action then behind a lot of these water-based zeolites? Because something that you come across a lot are nano zeolites that are prepared in water, so they're often like droplets, or you might have a tub of zeolite that you mix with water. How are we preventing aluminium from being released from those compounds?
Tracy, so nano zeolites are interesting. When I first got introduced to them, I couldn't work them out because the issue with nano zeolites are, if you ask them, does it leave the body, they can't produce the data. And it wasn't only until 2023 I actually met a professor who specialized in nano zeolites. And she told me, she goes, Dilly, this is the problem with nanoparticles. There is no evidence to ever show that they leave the body. So you actually don't know where in the system it's going. And don't get me wrong, if it's got nanoparticles in there and it sprays it in, you may feel a benefit, because if you've got a lot of toxicity and it's absorbing some of it, that's going to feel the benefit. So people have that instant benefit, they can see it, but there's no longitudinal safety data to show that it actually exits the body.
Well, that's incredibly concerning, actually, because I understand if you're ingesting zeolite, it's binding to certain toxins, so you're feeling the benefit. But if we don't know that it's leaving the body, and then where is it going? So you could literally just have zeolite bound to toxins just sitting around your body, or maybe being diverted to your fat cells, or I'm not saying it is, but I'm just thinking, what could be happening there.
Yeah, and
that's very concerning. Yeah.
You're completely right, and there's no evidence behind it. And then it gets kind of worse, because when I looked at nano zeolites, I remember sitting with Froxman, like our partners in Toxaprevent, and I remember sharing the products with them, like the nanoparticles. And I remember Ellen just turned to me and she was like, Dilly, this doesn't make sense, because zeolite needs water as a transport mechanism. It doesn't dissolve in water. And she was like, so these sprays that you're putting on liquid drops, she's like, how much particles are actually physically in there? Because it's very tough to get it to that small, and what's it actually physically doing? And so they don't share how much particles you're getting per spray. So could you overdose? Could you be underdosing? We just don't know. But it's okay, Because as long as they call themselves a food supplement and don't have that data and do some really good marketing, no one's the wiser. And that's infuriating for me, because I'm like, that you're literally destroying what is an incredible, powerful product or ingredient.
Yeah, it's a shame that
Particle.
the name of, Zeolite's name would be getting bashed by people that probably really know their stuff in terms of research, because it's a little bit sus. Because Zeolite is such a powerful product. Like, I wish I had learned about it like years and years ago, particularly when I was going through all my issues with EDS. Like, that would have made a massive difference. So it's such a shame to think that maybe important information isn't getting out to people because of this reason. But even in terms of, like, it makes sense why you can't say or guarantee how much zeolite you're getting per spray, because, as you said earlier, zeolite is a rock. So it separates from water. It doesn't emulsify with water.
Yeah.
So you can't actually ever measure how many parts are going to be in each spray. Let's go into purity testing. So how do, manufacturers of zeolite, how do you prove that your zeolite is pure, considering the fact that zeolite can bind to toxins and impurities in our environment? How do we prove that the supplemental zeolites aren't providing that?
I mean, I've got to call bullshit here, man. So, and I get infuriated by this, because, like, it comes across, so many people send me this information, because every time I talk about it, people send it across to me. And people claim purity testing. So they claim purity testing, right? And especially nano companies, anyone who's got a nano-based zeolite, they'll claim purity testing. But if you look at it now, we're going to use our logical brain now. So we're going to use the term common sense. If you look at it from a common sense perspective, if you nanofy a particle smaller and smaller and smaller again, the metals it's bound to, they're not going to be bigger. They're going to be smaller and smaller and smaller.
You're going to reduce the size of everything.
You're reducing the size of everything. So when you do the purity testing, of course, you're going to get lower levels of the toxins or the metals that it's bound to, because the particle's so small. But then what they're not telling you is, when they go into the manufacturing process, so you can send a batch off to be tested, get that purity testing, go, yeah, it's the best thing in the world. But then when they're manufacturing it, if they're not manufacturing it in a completely clean environment, it's just back to the drawing board again. You've got a literally a piece of volcanic ash or rock going into the system that's packed full of toxins.
Yeah.
And so, and I kind of like, I talk about them as I call them unprotected zeolites. Now, I want to show you an image,
that's
right?
a good term. Unprotected zeolites. Yeah. No, but it's true.
And a lot of it's down to tactics. If you look at their tactics of marketing, and I think we need to share the marketing tactics. If you go into their actual tactics, the way they're doing it, they use really clever wording, and people who know their stuff, but are bullshitting a little bit. Actually, no, I'm not going to use the word bullshitting a little bit. They're bullshitting because it fits their narrative. And, T, you know me so well, right? You've known me for so many years. You can call bullshit when you see bullshit, right? But a lot of people, because they don't know who these people are, they can't call bullshit.
But I would think that probably oftentimes, particularly in big organizations, even most of the people working in these organizations don't even know that it's bullshit. I think the challenge is that, this bullshit is incredibly convincing bullshit. And I don't want to go off on a total tangent, but something that I'm really passionate about is trying to find healthier, cleaner, safer products for our family. So whether that's the clothes we wear or the beauty or household products we use, things like this. Like, I do a lot of research, particularly since Rivi came along, to try and find products that are healthier for our family. And it's not my specialty. Like, toxicology is not my specialty. This is something that I've done a lot of personal research around and spent hours slogging through. And something that I've recognized is that there's a ton of companies out there that they come across like, yeah, this is the thing. We're clean, we're eco-friendly, we care about what's in our products. But actually, if you ask them the questions or you try and find the direct information, it's not there. And often when you do ask, for a direct question, because sometimes, you might just not think to put something on your website, or, you're not going to be able to cover every question. But when I email these companies, say with Rivi's nappies, for example, trying to find ones that don't use certain chemicals within the manufacturing, they actually don't have answers. And it usually transpires that, they are taking a shorter step in order to protect their margin, which is a challenge, by the way, because it is so difficult to compete in a market where there's companies that are using substandard manufacturing practices, maybe using substandard ingredients, utilizing the use of chemicals, which actually helps to cut costs in the process a lot, while also keeping the product at a price that consumers can afford. It's a really difficult thing that I wouldn't have an awareness of unless it was for working in the area that I do. So when I'm seeking out these types of products in other areas of our lives, I do have an understanding of like why a certain cost might be that, but it's a big challenge. So I totally get what you're saying.
What you just said there, I think, should be a video or content within itself, because that is such a topic that I think we do need to talk more about. And I'm going to bring it back to the Zeolite section of it. So I'm going to show you this picture on the screen, and this is for everyone to see. This is actually one of our facility in Germany, right? If you look at this image, you see that metal pipe that's coming down. That's actually filtering and pushing out fresh oxygen into the entire environment and atmosphere. Because when Mr. Gerner was actually creating this, and hats off to Mr. Gerner, like, it's not just the Germans, but Mr. Gerner, like his level of detail and focus is just unfathomable. Like,
he was ahead of his time.
Yeah, ahead of his time, and when he was bringing the research out. But he even said that the actual air that we breathe has to be done in a correct way, so that any part of that particle, it's always sealed. And there's more steps to manufacturing that. Like, obviously, some parts I can't reveal to people because it's part of our like secret recipe. But you will never ever see that part of that processing it ever touching the air.
Well, we went there. The whole manufacturing facility is sealed from the outside. So you have to go through several steps before you actually enter the manufacturing facility. And even then, there's even more steps until you get to the point where the product is being manufactured. So like there's a lot of things put in place to ensure the protection of the zeolite and the cleanliness of that zeolite, and to make sure that it is 100% clean, the product that you're taking. Yeah.
And when we actually went together and we sat down with them and you saw it, because it blew my mind. It blows my mind every time I go there, but seeing it again just shows you how much the quality goes into. And then it brings it onto the actual physical products. When you get your box of sachets or capsules, you will see that the actual powder is vacuum sealed. It's vacuum sealed in a physical, it's vacuum sealed in sachet. And did you know that sachet is actually lined in gold? So it's actually got gold in the physical sachet, because that gold doesn't allow like bacteria and stuff from spreading in. So they've lined the inside of the sachet in physical gold to protect the actual cannabinoids. So when you open it, you are guaranteeing the minute you put it into your purified water, or structured water as I like to call it now, if the minute you put it into that water and you drink it, you're getting a completely toxin-free, optimized detoxer or binder.
Which is why because I think sometimes there's questions on the level of packaging, and in all of the products that we use, we do try and be as sustainable as possible and reduce packaging as much as possible. But when it comes to zeolite, packaging is important. It needs to be vacuum sealed. You need to have all of those materials in place in order to protect it, so that when you are ingesting it, when you are opening that sachet, as you say, putting it into water, it is pure, clean zeolite, and that has been tested for impurities. So, along with the manufacturing process, can you talk a little bit more around the clinical studies behind Toxaprevent specifically? Because as far as I'm aware, Toxaprevent is the only zeolite on the market that not only is a licensed medical device, but also that has clinical studies behind it so that we're proving that it is pure and that it does bind to certain toxins and that it is removed from the body. Can you talk a little bit more on that?
Yeah, so it's that safety study that's in there. It's the safety studies that we've got, and they're not just like one-off safety studies. They're longitudinal safety studies, and I'm going to link all the studies in the description below. You can download them and view them yourself and view to your heart's content. But basically, when Toxaprevent first came out, what they had to do was to provide evidence that it actually, when you ingested it, it left the body. So there's a study I'm going to show you on screen now. This is a study from Dr. Nikolai Daskalov. And what Dr. Nikolai Daskalov had to prove was that the actual zeolite clinoptilolite, or MANC, which stands for Modified Activated Natural Clinoptilolite, that once it was ingested, it left the body. And so what he did was he got a radioactive particle to attach to the clinoptilolite. And by the way, yes, Toxaprevent does bind to radioactive particles. It literally bound to it, and then he x-rayed the body. And you'll see it in the stomach, in the intestines, and then within 24 hours, it's in the colon and it's left the body. So once it's absorbed that toxin, it didn't release it, which is really, it didn't let the technatum go.
Important to know.
Which is really important to know. It literally traveled through the system, and then the minute the person passed bowel movement, it left the body. So when they did the x-ray, if that yellow dot had come up in the liver, the kidneys, and the muscles and the tissues and the fats, we would have never got our licensing. And this is where, and I've got to say again, what an incredible, like Mr. Gurner, like he's not a scientist, but he put that together to make sure that safety was there. And that's so important. And that's what allowed us to become a medical device. And what a medical device is, when it basically means that the product can't have a physical function in the system. So, glasses. Mm-hmm. So anyone who's wearing glasses, your glasses are classed as medical devices because when you pick them up, you put them on and they help your eyes to see. They don't change your eyes. They don't change the physical eye structure or anything. They don't add anything to the system. They're just there to make your eyes see better. You take them off and they go. That's it.
They have a functional use.
They have a functional use. And that's what Toxaprevent is. It literally goes in, absorbs, and it leaves the body. And we had to prove that and show that that function was there, that it wasn't changing anything in the system. And because of that, we're the only zeolite clinoptilolite in the world that have that medical device license, and we have a leaky gut study.
Tell me about it.
So as you know, you've seen the study as well.
Well, I know about it, but tell us about it because it's really interesting.
That leaky gut study showed that when you took just the capsules over a 3-month period, it bound to histamine and reduced inflammation in the intestines, and it allowed the intestines to repair itself, therefore reversing and repairing a leaky gut. It's why if you read the actual Toxaprevent packaging, it actually reads medical device to strengthen the intestinal barrier. Mm-hmm. If you put that in layman's terms, it's a medical device that's clinically proven to reverse and repair a leaky gut, which, as we know, is the root cause. And I say this with confidence. If you follow us on Instagram, if you watch our YouTube videos, is the root cause of histamine overload and mast activation syndrome.
Mm-hmm. But also, it's the reason behind a plethora of gut issues and other health issues. Plus, repairing a leaky gut or repairing excess intestinal permeability is a really, really difficult thing to do. Any clinician will know that that's a challenging step because you're trying to repair that permeability while also accounting for factors like stress and medication and food and toxins and all of the other things that are going to be fighting to increase that permeability. You're having to counteract that within like a day-to-day context, and that's actually really, really difficult. So having a product like this that can lift the heavy weight, if you will, in that section is really, really good. So to put all of this into context a little bit, we now understand what zeolite is and where it comes from and some of the disadvantages around it and why the manufacturing process is so important, and why there's so much weight put into that side of things when it comes to Toxaprevent, which is the zeolite that Nuva Healthcare stocks. It kind of feels like, to me, like there's a lot of the other zeolites out there are lying to you in a sense, because they're not, as far as I'm aware, they're not talking about this.
I mean, a lot of it is because it's just really good wording. And I said before, they're bullshitting their way through it because it brings sales in. And don't get me wrong, I understand it. Like, as businesses, they have to function. But the way that they're framing things is completely inaccurate. So, like, to kind of really emphasize this point, I'm going to share the screenshot, right? This is a slide from a presentation that I did, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it talks about the different toxin binders. And these are some of the statements that these companies are using. So, for example, let's pull up the first one. So this is a very, very popular binder on the market. And on their physical website, they actually state this in factual information. They say there is no one binder that can eliminate all toxins. Many binders miss key toxins and allow for that recirculation. Ours binds to and helps remove a wide array of toxins in the GI for a smoother, more thorough detox. Okay, prove it. What they haven't showed you is those binders. How do you know they don't bind to each other? How do you know that those binders aren't working against each other? How do those binders aren't clean? That message, that wording's lovely, beautiful. Congratulations, you've done some excellent wording, but show me the evidence.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't show you the evidence. They surround by it. And the next one is another company. Or actually, I think it might be the same company, but they use the term proprietary blend, and they call it a zeolite. And so if you call it a zeolite, I've just told you there's 170 different types. So which zeolite?
Which zeolite?
Because
what particle size?
What particle size? You're calling it a proprietary blend because you kind of can get away with that factor. And they've put things like activated charcoal. Is it more activated charcoal? And we know activated charcoal has its negativities. What else is in there? And this is the issue with it. And then the last one, Tracy, this company infuriates me, and I'll tell you why. Like, so just to let everyone in on a little topic, they actually contacted me to gain my advice on their product because they kept saying to me, they said, Dilly, how are you able to make, these claims? How are you able to talk about your product in such a way? And so I sat with them, met them, and the guy that kind of introduced himself to me was the marketeer behind the company, and he actually didn't understand his product. He didn't know what it was. He kept harping on about his, it being the most cleanest. He said, sorry, it having the most highest amounts of lactololite. But that didn't make sense because ours is 95%. And I was like, yeah, and ours is 100%. What's your point? What's your point here? If you actually look at the product, they put it into capsules and into powder form. And what they've done, sorry, Aaron, can you just go up again? So it's so funny. They sell these veggie capsules, right? And on the actual physical product, if you saw it, you would think, oh, that's zeolite cryptolite in capsule form. I can take it. If you read the packaging, it says the choice of the process used in the various application is the sole responsibility of the user. So, and then if you putting the onus onto you, right? Yeah. And then if you actually go to the website and read what the product's been actually licensed for, it's agriculture, it's for cleaning machinery, it's for water pond filtration, and then they literally, in another statement, mention the word food supplement, part of something completely different. So they've actually bullshitted and they stuck it on Amazon. So they're literally bullshitting their way through it.
You're joking.
No, I'm being deadly serious.
That's terrifying. Because we can't sell on Amazon because we're a medical device, but they can put that up.
As a food supplement.
As a food supplement. But it's not even licensed as a food supplement. That's dangerous.
And the thing is, because they've got that word, warnings, the warnings that they put the
They
onus
put
on
the onus on
onto
you, so they can just do what they want.
You can do what you want.
Yeah.
I can say and do
Which
what I want.
is a very common tactic. Something that I wanted to just highlight as well around the quote that you mentioned in terms of there is no one binder that can bind to all toxins, so you need to add in other binders or other supplements that are known to have an effect on toxins. I just want to focus a little bit on that statement because yes, that's true, and our tests for the Toxaprevent Zeolite, there's a specific range of toxins that we've been shown to bind to and remove from the body. And now would probably be a good time to mention those. So our studies show that Toxaprevent binds to histamine, mold, mycotoxins, ammonium, aflatoxins, ochratoxins, mercury, lead, aluminium, cadmium, arsenic, nickel, tin, dimethylamine, nitrosamines, and tyramine. So those are all of the toxins that we have proven that they bind to. And there's other products on the market out there that are also toxin binders, and read your research around what's been proven to bind to what. And yeah, you should be you should be getting the correct product for what you need. But just throwing loads of different binders into a mix there's nothing proved there. It doesn't show that, if I just take all of these things, then obviously the effect is going to be that all of my toxins will be removed. That's not how the body works. That's not how these components work. It doesn't make sense.
You're as we said at the start of this entire discussion, the body is a natural filter and it will filter out most toxins from the system.
Yeah.
It's the build-up that is an issue.
Well, that's a really important point, because I think equally on the other side, sometimes the argument is, you don't need to take anything to support detoxification because, the liver is the body's natural detoxifier. Yes, that's true. The liver is the body's natural detoxifier, but in a lot of cases, it gets overspent. There's too many toxins and it slows down and it needs a nap. So it needs a little bit of help.
It needs a nap. It's so true.
It gets overwhelmed by toxins, and then it starts to become sluggish, and then we start to get all of these different symptoms. And a lot of the toxins there's certain toxins that we're seeing a lot of people have heavy amounts of because of, we live in similar environments and things like that. Heavy metals being a big one, histamine being a big one. So if that's your issue, then this zeolite has been proven to remove that. If that's not your issue, then probably zeolite isn't what you need. You need to look at something else. But don't just take a load of stuff without having any idea how it works in the body and if it's being removed. That doesn't make sense. That's not going to necessarily make you better. It might make you feel a little bit better out of sheer luck, but it's not exactly a safe way of going about things. So speaking of binders and detoxifiers on the market, something that a lot of people use is activated charcoal. And I hear you talking a lot about it in relation to zeolite. Can you talk a little bit about the differences there?
I mean, I think we both could talk a lot about this, because when we were talking about activated charcoal, you go on Google, type in activated charcoal, forget the blog posts and everything that everyone's talking about. Actually read the research that's been done on activated charcoal. It was used in hospital settings, and it was used when someone ingested too much medication, heavy metal poisoning, or food poisoning.
Well, it's basically used when someone was poisoned.
Poisoned. I'm saying the word poisoned, not a toxic load, poisoned. Mm-hmm. And so they discovered activated charcoal was part of that process of it, right? And they weighed out how many grams a human being can have. And then someone reading that thought, you know what I can do? I'll stick it into a food supplement and I'll sell it to people. Now, I've just talked about how zeolite comes from volcanic ash, right? And activated charcoal or activated carbon. Some of the very good marketeers have started calling it activated carbon to get away from the charcoal aspect, but it's the same thing.
Which is often used in like water filters and things like that, just
Correct.
for context.
Yeah, activated carbon water filters. And they don't talk about what toxins are already in there. They don't talk about the particle size. They don't talk about what it's mopping up. But what they used it in hospital settings for was if you ingested those toxins, within 4 to 6 hours, you could take the activated charcoal, and they called it I think it's called MDAC, so multiple dose activated charcoal. So you could have more of it depending on the level of toxicity in the person's symptoms and their behavior.
And also there was single dose activated charcoal as well. So they used it in 2 contexts.
Correct. Completely. Yeah, correct. Thank you for adding that on, because as you know, I get so excited about this topic. I've done to get away with myself.
But I guess for the context, so in the research, it uses it in a once-off kind of setting. So we're talking about in cases of poisoning. They've done research around taking single doses of activated charcoal for less serious cases of poisoning. I know there's not so much like less serious is a weird thing to say in the case of poisoning, but less life-threatening cases of poisoning, single doses, and then they looked at multiple doses of charcoal for literally life-threatening poisoning situations. But I think what's really important to be aware of there is that the research around activated charcoal is taken into a short-term context where you're taking a high quantity of it once, twice, maybe a few times over, literally a short period of time. We're not looking, we're not looking, we're talking like within hours. We're not looking at there's no research that I'm aware of that you've been taking it over a long period of time. So days, weeks, months, years.
And
so we don't know what's happening.
And we literally don't. And basically, they started bringing out activated charcoal as a food supplement. So as to add on to what you just said there, someone created a food supplement. And I still remember when it came at food supplement. I was actually at an event in Manchester and someone called it Windies, I think it was called. And it's not, I don't think the product's available anymore.
Oh, because a lot of people take it for flatulence.
Flatulence, right? And Windies, right? So they called it for that. But basically, people don't understand activated charcoal, and I'm going to prove this point with something as a bit of a joke. So when I was doing my research on activated charcoal, if you find any blogs on activated charcoal, look at the references. They don't reference studies, they reference other websites.
Yeah.
Do you know how many people in the health industry have been absolutely nearly lost their careers because they referenced an article? And I was chuckling my ass off because some of these big companies who have got activated charcoal are selling it, but referencing blog posts, but referencing other websites. So, and I'm going to link the study that I'm talking about. It's in the description. You can read the activated charcoal. And if anyone's got any research and they want to bring me to my attention for activated charcoal, because I've looked, I promise you I have looked, please do leave it in the comments. But yeah, activated charcoal, if you've got food poisoning, great, use it. You got heavy metal poisoning, great, use it because it can be used in those settings. But as a detox or as a binder, no. No, the data isn't there. It's not safe and you shouldn't be recommending it.
There isn't really a lot of research around the dosing. So we don't know if we're taking enough, if we're taking too much. We don't know what's safe. All we really know is the quantities that have been used in the cases of poisoning. We don't really know how it works in the body, how much is there a loading dose, is there a maintenance dose, what's happening long term. So I think, it's definitely an interesting thing. I think activated charcoal or as a product is a really interesting thing. There's just a lot of questions that we need more evidence and research around.
100%. As a water filter, fantastic. We've got it in our water filter. Activated carbon is part of one of our water filter that we use. And so, as a water filter, great.
One element.
As an air filter, great. But as a supplement, as something to ingest, no.
The research just not.
It's just not there.
It could be great. It could be excellent. But the research just isn't there yet.
Yeah. And
we just don't know.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I don't think anyone's willing to do it. And if they do it, love to read it, love to see it. And I think that's the issue when it comes to binders and when we're recommending them, it's about recommending the right binder for the right use at the right dosage and at the right particle size. And I can't emphasize size really matters. And that's really important. Tracy and everyone watching, don't take that out of context.
I don't know what you're talking about.
So-
you don't know what I thought.
Yeah. So with zeolite, clear up to low light, size matters. It has to be between that 6 and 10 microns and have the evidence that it leaves the system. I'm going to put all of the research below. So if you go onto our YouTube channel, there's actually a presentation on Toxaprevent where we actually go through all that research in even more detail. But in the description, I'm going to link all of that evidence that I've spoken about, and you can do your own research. And please let me know what you think.
And I think from my perspective, you know, we came here to talk about zeolite. And as I said in the beginning, like, it is a bit of a magic bullet of a supplement in a way, because there's so many amazing uses for it. But if you are interested in zeolites and you are considering taking zeolites, I hope that we've highlighted some considerations to make as well, because as amazing as it is and as many advantages as there are to taking zeolite, there's also a lot of disadvantages. And I know we spoke about Toxaprevent a lot. Obviously, we're going to speak about that because that's the product that we found has the best research. And so that's why we sell it, because we're passionate about it. But you don't even need to take Toxaprevent. That doesn't need to be the one you take. But just understand that there's massive benefits around zeolite. And if you are taking zeolite, to please just consider some of the things that we mentioned. Do your research and make sure that you're getting a safe product. Cool.
Amazing.
Thanks, Dilly.
Thanks, T.